Hello and welcome. It's been a little while since I've done a full-length video, but things have just they've kind of been moving fast, and now for the last several days now, it feels like things have tremendously slowed down, and it's super discouraging. I know we have these leads with Mexico and all of that, but it's hard to have a lot of confidence that something's going to turn up from this, because nothing else has turned up anything for us, right? And yeah, it sucks. Being this far into it, almost day 20 or beyond, and having literally nothing concrete to really stand on. I'm really hoping for the best. I'm still holding out hope, but I don't know. It got me kind of looking at other things. And I've heard some stuff going back and forth. I've weighed in on it myself with the sheriff and just some of the issues and the mistakes that was made throughout this investigation. But I dug a little bit deeper than just present day. And the more I dug, the more disturbed I got. And I felt like there's too much here to try to squeeze it into a little short 3-minute video. So I'm going to do a full-length video today about Sheriff Nanos and just some of his history, and how that, I believe, has impacted a lot of things that we're seeing today. So, if you haven't caught on, I really don't like the guy very much. But I'm gonna do my due diligence in telling you exactly why. Okay. Before we get into it, though, everything in this video is alleged. It is my speculation, my opinion, based off of the research that I've done for myself. I encourage everybody to go and do their own research and formulate your own opinions. And as I've always said, and will always say, please do so respectfully. Okay, so what really started me down this rabbit hole of little Sheriff Nanos here was actually Brian Enton's video with Sergeant Aaron Cross that happened just a few days ago. Just take a quick listen.
Tell me a little bit about, I read about a no confidence vote for the sheriff.
Yes, sir.
When was that?
That was, if my memory serves me correctly, it was in 2024, early 2024, I believe. And we took an anonymous no confidence vote, or confidence vote, and it returned, except for one vote, it was unanimous no confidence in Sheriff Nanos. And that was done to kind of try and get the word out to the public, to the voting public in Pima County, that we've got some real issues in this department.
What are the, I mean, so why don't they like him?
So here's the thing. I understand that this is kind of getting away from the narrative that, everything should be focused on Nancy, and, I've even said it myself, who I don't give a shit about the issues between the FBI and the sheriff, and that still remains true as far as it pertains to the investigation. However, when I watched Aaron Cross put his ass on the line the way that he did, speaking so freely and so truthfully about the issues within that department, I started thinking about the fact that after this case is done, right, after the dust settles, whatever the outcome might be, Pima County is still left with Sheriff Nanos in charge. And I feel like some of these individuals who have spoken out, right, some of his former and even present colleagues to this day are speaking out, expressing a lot of concern about the sheriff and the way he conducts himself as a leader. And I think, I don't think that they're trying to take away from Nancy and the importance of the investigation, but I think they are hopeful that this case and this investigation, with how massive it is and how many eyes are on it, that maybe somebody will hear their cries for help within that department, that maybe there will be an opportunity to take a closer look at the sheriff in his leadership and help them make the changes that they've so desperately been trying to make themselves for the last, several years, it sounds like. So with that being said, again, I understand this isn't going to be like the crack the case wide open for Nancy Guthrie, but please maybe give it a shot. Listen to what I am about to share with you about Sheriff Nanos, because beyond, Nancy deserving better, because there's definitely things that I believe have impacted and impeded upon the case in a negative way as far as the way that the sheriff has handled things. At Pima County as a whole deserves better from their sheriff's department. And you got to think, Pima County Sheriff's Department covers a very massive area. It's huge. I think some 2 million people or something like that. Like, they deserve better from their leadership and from their law enforcement. So, let me get off my soapbox. I really hope that you take a listen and actually, hear me out on all of this. And, let's just get into this, all right?
You're fair in your questions today.
Okay.
I thought that the post on last night that I received of what you guys displayed on your screen of faults from this department, not one, not two, not some, every single one of those can be disputed, that they're completely without any factual basis to them.
It starts this way. Delayed FBI assistance. That's a bit questionable because the FBI said it, but the sheriff said it didn't happen. Crime scene released quickly. Well, the sheriff copped to that. Missed the roof camera. They did. It had to be taken off days later. Delayed thermal imaging plane.
Okay, so I want to interject here really quick about the thermal plane, because I really honestly, and I may be mistaken, but I feel like this wasn't talked about or known about at all until this interview that Brian Enton had with Sergeant Aaron Cross. Let's take a listen to that really quick.
What happened with that? I've heard some rumblings about the search plane and the pilot, I think, or do you know much about that situation?
Yes, sir. It was a pilot / TFD, the tactical flight deputy. So our plane has two people in it. It's the pilot and the person behind him who is operating the high definition cameras, the FLIR, all that. And so there was a pilot / TFD who was normally assigned to work that day with a pilot. However, he was transferred the week before, I believe on January 25th. And he was transferred back to patrol, and as a result of that, he was not replaced. And so as a result of that, the plane was not able to be used immediately. Eventually, they called the TFD out that day, and then they flew back to the hangar, I understand, and then got the plane out of the hangar and got it overhead. But that took 2 or 3 hours from what I understand.
So I really feel like this sets the stage for everything that I want to talk about in this video, and sets the stage for Nanos, really. And, you could try to argue with me about, oh, well, this was a decision he made a week prior to the biggest case he'll probably ever work in his entire life coming across his desk. And sure, yeah, it was the week before. How would he have ever known? But that's kind of the point I want to make. His decision-making can be so reckless that he would rather see one of the most valuable assets that Arizona has for law enforcement. He would rather see that unstaffed, unmanned for his department so that he can have his revenge, have his retaliation. Okay? And in order to show that this isn't just like a coincidence, that this was just really bad timing and like, an anomaly, if you will, I want to walk us back to 2024 really quick. And I'm going to show how this is a pattern. This is an ongoing issue. This is how he chooses to be a leader. He chooses to be a dictator, essentially. And that's my opinion. And anybody who goes against him in any way, shape, or form, or anybody he perceives as being against him, gets this exact same discipline, gets transferred, gets stepped on, gets put on a shit detail. Okay? These decisions, as a leader, have impacted the department as well as this investigation with Nancy Guthrie. Not just with this thermal plane situation, there are other things, and we're going to touch on them as we go through this. I'm going to start with the election of 2024, though, and I could spend a lot of time on this section. There is so much to it, but I'm going to do my best to summarize. Okay, so in 2024, Sheriff Nanos was running for re-election. He had already served a term from 2020 to 2024. From my understanding, there was a lot of concerns and questions about his leadership style from that first term. Heather Lappin was the lieutenant at the time. she expressed interest in wanting to run for sheriff against him. She hadn't filed her statement of interest or anything like that. This was just, probably talking to some colleagues or something like that. Well, word got back to Nanos that this was going to be happening. And in my opinion, this is when he started his whole campaign of retaliation and revenge. He starts by disciplining her over teaching a class that she had taught 7 times prior with no disciplinary action to follow. But this time, after knowing that she was going to run against him, he decides that he's going to discipline her by doing what now? Transferring her. Transfers her to an adult detention center. This is a threat, in my opinion, 100% a threat. You should not continue to go for sheriff or else kind of deal. But Lappin, she's got thick skin. I think most women in the law enforcement do. She still files her statement of interest. Within weeks of filing that statement of interest, she is approached by Captain Anderson. I'm not sure who he is relative to all of this exactly, but he apparently revokes her teaching authority entirely and then command transfers her yet again to the jail. She has described fully in her lawsuit. Yes, she is now suing Sheriff Nanos. This is an ongoing litigation. She filed in April of 2025. No trial date or anything is set, but this is all pending right now, okay? In her lawsuit, she describes that this lateral move from the detention center to the jail was actually a demotion in responsibility, stature, and an opportunity in her career. So it was a punitive action, essentially, right? And it doesn't just stop there. Sergeant Aaron Cross, he at the same time was just entering into his presidency of the union. The union, mind you, is very young. It was only established in 2018 in Pima County Sheriff Department, but obviously it's a good thing that it's there. He thought it might be a good idea to kind of gauge the climate, find out where, the department was as far as morale and everything like that. So he did that no confidence vote. It's an anonymous vote to determine what the confidence was in their sheriff. Everybody in the union, besides one person, had voted that they had no confidence in Sheriff Nanos. All of this kind of converges into a protest. There's protests going on, and I'm just going to play this little snippet of Aaron Cross explaining this a little bit to Brian Inton in his interview.
Yes, sir. And the counties that are next to us, their sheriffs are very popular. Pinal County is a great example. They're directly to our north, and their deputies adore their sheriff, from my understanding. Ours is different because of how he runs the department and the retaliation that they do to the deputies that speak up or even perceived to be against Nanos, or even he heard them say something against him. Because of that, we had a couple dozen of them protest with me against the sheriff during the last race, and I am unaware of any other instance where deputies protested against their sheriff for an election race. But it happened last time. But it wasn't without risk and fear. A lot of those guys did it while wearing masks, just to protect themselves from retaliation.
Now, I include the protests here because Nanos doesn't just stop with these 2 transfers. He takes it yet another step further. I'm going to go ahead and just play these clips from reports and such that were done at that time.
There's been a lot of controversy flying back and forth about Sheriff Nanos' decision to take an employee who is running against him for sheriff. We asked the sheriff about critics who say his timing looks very political. That a candidate, a rival for election, for you, is basically taken out of circulation, at least at work, very close to the election.
Yeah, well, the timing is not my timing. I didn't violate any policies. If there's policy that's violated, we all have rules to follow. It's really that simple. If you're not going to follow the rules, then my job is to enforce those rules.
Nanos found every reason possible to continue to go after Lappin. And in my opinion, this is slander. This is a smear campaign. And ultimately, it looks like it did cost her the election, because this election was the one that Cross talks about being so close that it was a mandatory revote per the laws of Arizona because it was less than 500 vote separation, which is also like historical. I don't think it's ever been that close before. So we could sit here and debate back and forth whether or not he was in the right or not. You can see right there how well he's dismissing his actions and covering his tracks and making it seem like he's just trying to do the right thing in his role. But let me just add this little snippet in there because I can't get over this part. And in the climate that we're in today with the Epstein files and all of this stuff, this should enrage every single person watching this right now.
Even before Nanos put his opponent on leave, Democratic Pima County Supervisor Dr. Matt Hines was already concerned enough about Nanos' other actions as sheriff to cross party lines and support Lappin.
This is a man who has refused for unclear reasons to investigate a very concerning allegation among two of his employees for 2 years, but within days is able to generate some bogus investigation charges, allegations against Heather Lappin.
Hines says he and the other supervisors have already asked the Arizona Attorney General to investigate how Nanos handled the long-standing investigation. Now he'll urge them to ask the Attorney General to look into the way Nanos put Lappin on leave so close to Election Day.
So I like what Matt says in there, specifically that he could concoct this whole disciplinary action that was so harsh, so intense, so severe against Heather Lappin, but he ignored severe and very serious allegations and accusations amongst two employees, a female employee and her superior. Look, that tells me, personally, everything I need to know about the integrity and character of this man. And again, he is running point on Guthrie's investigation, guys. But it doesn't even stop here.
Is it true, and I just heard this from some people around the sheriff's office, that the homicide team is pretty inexperienced right now?
They're pretty new, and that goes for really all the departments. So we have 96 detectives. 45 of them are detective ones, meaning they're pretty new. Inside the unit, I think the person that has the most experience inside that unit has 3 years in homicide. And then some of them are more experienced detectives. They just haven't been in homicide. So there's been a lot of turnover. Another example is that our deputies, we have 195 deputies in patrol. 101 are on probation, meaning they have less than a year. We've experienced several waves of exodus of deputies going to other agencies or retiring early to go work somewhere else. So we're feeling the consequences of that, both on the detective side and in patrol.
Yeah, that's kind of alarming when you think about a case this complicated.
Very.
And we know the sheriff's office is still technically in charge. And you'd think there'd be people with decades of experience.
Yes. And if this case happened 10 years ago, we would have a lot more experience to handle it.
After the 2024 election, there was this mass exodus, as it's described, of transfers. And, they don't specify it really, but I think it's pretty clear that he was basically cleaning house, right? Anybody that he felt was against him, he was getting rid of, pushing out the door in one way or another, whether it be retiring or going to work somewhere else or being transferred to a shit detail. Okay? So when I see him sitting on national television, present day, in this investigation and telling reporters shit like this.
I have a team of young men and women who do this every day. I hear the pundits that, the crime scene should have been done, should have been held longer. Look, this team of mine has done this type of investigation, homicides, for example, for decades. They have one of the highest solvency clearance rates in the country. Sometimes they get that case that you think will never be solved done in a day. They're very good. They're very well trained. They know what they're doing.
I'm going to have to use one of the sheriff's little catchphrases here. Well, I don't know where you're getting that from. But really, though, where are you getting that from? The experience of your team is decades? We just heard Cross talking about the tenure of the homicide team. And the homicide team was the team that was called in to this investigation straight out the gates. The homicide team has a maximum of 3 years. Like that's the most tenured person is 3 years, regardless of if they've had detective experience elsewhere. Like that doesn't. 3 years in homicide is nothing. Okay, and then let's talk about the number of homicides that Tucson and Pima County deal with per year. 14. That's a great number when you're considering it like, oh, that's not very much. That is awesome. That is perfect. That is great. But when you put it in the context of experience, that ain't shit. So there's no way in hell that the sheriff and PCSD should be the ones leading this investigation. And furthermore, the sheriff should have acknowledged that, understood that, like, hey, you know what? We are really inexperienced. This is obviously a major case, a huge case, a complex case, and we're not equipped for it. So you, the FBI, you take point, and we would love to offer a supportive role for you. That should have been immediate. And it wouldn't have made him look bad. That's even mentioned. It wouldn't have made him look bad. That would have been the honorable thing to do. That shows integrity. But no. I think at this point, you cannot deny that his ego is 100% leading the charge. 100%. Now, I'm going to kind of start wrapping it up here with this. That last bullet point. Let's talk about that really quick. That last bullet point I thought was really interesting when this first came out, this list of missteps, right? And I thought it was interesting to see this listed as like wrongfully detaining a man when we literally just had 3 people detained more recently. And there's nothing saying anything about that was wrongful, right? Or, But then I remember what Banfield said in one of her podcasts.
It doesn't mean that the third guy, Carlos, from a couple weeks ago, he was the first guy who was, raided and then detained and then let go. I don't think that is this, because I don't think that was a warrant. I still don't think it was a warrant. Nobody could find the warrant for that. And also, the language that the sheriff used was so weird. Court-authorized search, which to me meant the courts are allowed to search if there's probable cause to think Nancy's inside. You can just bust that door down. That's what I thought happened with Carlos's search, but I'm just reading his language for you. You can decide.
No warrant, right? I thought that was really interesting. But then I started thinking back to that Rio Rico SWAT movement. And I started thinking about the fact that, like, there really wasn't any FBI there. I don't know if there was any FBI at all. If there was very minimal. And then we have Carlos coming out and having his interview with ABC, Tucson.
Jesse, what comes next here?
Well, I think, from our perspective, the first thing that really needs to happen is that the Pima County Sheriff's Office and Sheriff Nanos need to clear Carlos's name. They need to make this right. They've falsely arrested an innocent man. They've subjected his family to misery, humiliation, handcuffs, and there's no evidence.
And then in the same interview, I hear something that really...
We asked the sheriff that even just this morning, and he said everyone they detained, because there was another person detained last Friday, right? And they said they were cleared to a point, was his wording. Has there been any evidence presented here? I know they mentioned their search warrants, right? And it's not just them searching willy-nilly, but from what you've seen and what you've heard, is there evidence here that makes this?
No, there's no evidence whatsoever. Our understanding is that they obtained the search warrant they obtained that allowed them to search Carlos's vehicle and his family's property through the use of a secret affidavit. As far as we know, that affidavit is sealed and remains sealed. And, our suspicion, our educated suspicion, is that this has something to do with cell phone pings.
A secret affidavit, huh? So here's what I've concluded about that in regards to Carlos. I think that the sheriff jumped the gun on this one. I think that he thought he had his perp. And where they talk about him blocking the FBI with evidence, I don't know that it had anything really to do with the DNA or the glove. I think maybe he blocked this from them. I think maybe he didn't tell them about his focus on Carlos, about cell phone pings or whatever. I think he went behind their back or in secret or something like that, potentially to a judge that he has in his pocket or has a good relationship with, and got this weird, I don't know, court authorized search, some type of authorization off the books, right? And I think he went in guns blazing, trying to be the hero. But he was wrong. And now, I think he's just going to be adding another lawsuit to his nice little list of litigations that he's going to have to deal with. That's just my opinion. That's what I think happened. I think that the sheriff has fucked things up over and over again in this. I think that he is holding on to this case because he wants to be the one that solved it. I think he wants the notoriety. I think he wants the claim to fame, if you will. And and honestly, at this point, I hope it's actually to the detriment of him, because it's bullshit. The sheriff is currently under criminal investigation for his behavior and actions that he took during the 2024 election, for the fact that he ignored serious allegations of SA and R for 2 years. Those allegations and accusations were actually brought to him in 2022. And he's now being sued by 2 of his employees, Lappin and Cross. Both have a suit against him, right? I mentioned Lappin's. Hers was filed in 2025. I think Nanos came back and filed a service of discovery in November of 2025. And so now we're waiting for that to close, which I think is May of this year. May and June of this year. No trial date is set. And now you could probably add Carlos to that list of lawsuits. I'm just saying, Pima County will be left with this guy for another couple years, unless something happens to remove him. And when I started this video, I said that, Nancy Guthrie deserves better, but so does Pima County. So, thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you in the next one. Please like, subscribe, comment, and until next time.